I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Presidential Climate Commission. It is the second meeting and the first proper working meeting of the Commission. We have apologies from the President. Just to let you know that we have a fairly large number of people who are attending this meeting as observers. In other words, sitting into this meeting and observing. There's a huge interest in the work of the Commission. And having looked at the list of people who have asked to attend, it is quite clear to me that we have in this meeting just about everybody who matters on the subject matter in South Africa. So that's very pleasing indeed for me. I'd like to welcome the cabinet ministers who are present here. We have a number of ministers who are present and who will join us soon. These are the Minister of Environment, Trade and Industry, Mineral Resources and Energy, also Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Higher Education, Transport and Finance. So we have an excellent representation from the government. I'd like to start off my comments by quoting from this morning's Financial Times. And all of you would be aware that the Financial Times is published out of London, which is one of the global citadels of financial capital. And London itself is one of the citadels of modern capitalism itself. And the Financial Times, one could say, is the voice of that financial capital. And today, in a piece published by the editorial board, I don't think it was meant to coincide with our meeting, but I read it this morning and I thought I'll read one or two paragraphs of that opinion piece to you. It says, no generation should face a future blighted by a chaotic climate and environmental devastation, yet today's young people do. Their parents were the beneficiaries of the great acceleration, a post-war explosion in human activity with few recent precedents. In the past 50 years, prosperity for millions has risen and the population has doubled. Natural resource extraction has tripled, helping to fuel an almost five-fold increase in the global economy. Young people have been left to pick up the environmental bill. They live in a world of poisoned rivers, dirty air, razed forests, acidifying oceans, polluted by plastic. And then it goes on to say that greenhouse gas emissions are on course to warm temperatures enough to make today's melting ice sheets and extreme weather look like the opening act to a climate tragedy of unthinkable proportions. But all is not lost. Despite predictions that the coronavirus crisis would sap enthusiasm for environmental action, the reverse is happening in many parts of the world. Global investment in renewables and other clean technologies has reached record levels, as have green bonds and electric car sales. Countries and companies alike are racing to set net zero emission targets. Investors are demanding companies clean up their acts. And it goes on and on. And when I was a young activist, it was only the sort of environmental organizations on the periphery of society and on the margins who were saying this kind of thing. And today this is being said by a publication that could not be more mainstream than the London Financial Times. Since the establishment of this commission, I must say that I've been rather encouraged by what I consider to be a high degree of consensus in South African society on some of the fundamentals. There is consensus between all of the role players that the planet is warming, and that anything above a warming of 2 degrees Celsius will lead to enormous devastation and suffering, and that what we should try our best to do is to limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. There is also consensus that we can impact on this process and reverse it. And there's agreement that we should work towards a net zero economy by 2050. And I'm saying this because in many ways, the environmental debate seems to have been settled. The big environmental questions regarding climate change and global warming. So the challenge that we now have is how do we get from where we are to net zero emissions by 2050 in a manner which creates jobs and opportunities, in a manner which promotes prosperity, in a manner which expands the South African economy, and in a manner which does not result in suffering for workers and communities who currently depend directly on or indirectly on the fossil fuel industry. And so the task, the way I see the task of the Commission is to spend most of its bandwidth on this economic and developmental challenge. Because if we cannot find a way of reducing emissions by growing the economy and creating opportunities and jobs, then whatever we come up with will be dead in the water. It frankly will not be accepted by the masses of South Africans. Of course, there isn't much of a choice that we have, because both in South Africa, but more importantly, globally, the capital markets are changing their positions more rapidly than any of us could have imagined would happen. And I think this is something that's going to drive a lot of the innovation and the change that is to come. I'll just give you one example. In the run-up to COP26, which takes place later this year in Glasgow, there is something called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And that is a build-up on an announcement which was made about 10 days ago concerning the Net Zero Banking Alliance. 43 of the world's largest banks have come together to form what they refer to as the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And these banks aim to focus on delivering the banking sector's ambition to align its work to the climate commitments made in the Paris Agreement. There is also something called the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative. And these asset managers, there are 87 asset managers. In other words, these are the people that manage money, almost all of the money that's available to economies around the world. All in all, they cumulatively manage $37 trillion. And I know recently in the South African media, a lot has been said about trillions, but in South African terms, you're talking about 500 or 600 trillion rands that's being managed. And it's the capital markets that will become completely inaccessible to any economy that is not moving fairly rapidly towards a low emissions operation. Now, having said that, at this first meeting, what we've done is I thought we should tackle the important questions head on right from the beginning, so that we set the right kind of framework and agenda and tone for the work of the Commission. As I've said, that the challenge is not to convince people that global warming is a bad thing. The challenge is to work out how we turn around this, the South African economy to a low emissions economy. And it's for that reason that I thought right at the outset, we should have the Minister for Mineral, Energy and Resources and the Minister for Trade and Industry, just to share with us their own thoughts, because these are the people that have the big challenges. They are the ones that in their minds would have the sort of the picture of what it would take and what kind of consensus would be needed from the role players and from society to do this. But notwithstanding everything I've said, I think they will also indicate to us that we're not starting from zero. Much thought and attention has already gone into these matters, and we'd like to hear from them. We'll also hear from Minister Creasy. There are other ministers that are present here, and even though I haven't put them on the list of speakers, I'd like to invite them, if they so wish, to make any remarks to share with us, because I think what's on your mind is of importance to us as a Commission, both in your capacity as members of the Commission, but also as your capacity as leaders of government. And then I've invited again in this opening session, three CEOs of three large companies to make opening remarks. The fossil fuel industry, and particularly the coal and coal-related sectors of our economy and industries, are the ones that have the biggest challenges. And as a Commission, we don't see this as somebody else's challenge. We see it as our challenge, because we are a national commission, and the coal industry is our industry as South Africans, and we need to find a way of doing what needs to be done. So I thought it would be good for us to just hear from the leaders of these industries themselves what's on their minds. I've asked the CEO of Eskom and the CEO of Sasol and the CEO of Exxaro just to share with us just their remarks, their thoughts, their orientations. And then I've asked the Secretary General of COSATU to also talk to us, because in the industries that we're talking about, probably the most important stakeholder is organized labor. And we'd like him to share some of his thoughts with us. And then after that, we will go into, in a sense, some of the business issues of today's meetings. I'd like to spend a bit of time with the commissioners introducing themselves to each other. Some of us have not even met each other. And then we'll have presentations from important work that is already being done. We have the National Planning Commission. Professor Mahoba is here, who will talk to us about work which they are doing. We'll have a presentation from the National Business Initiative about work that's going on in organized business. And then we'll go into talking about the NDCs, which is the nationally determined contributions. So there's a country we need to table at COP26 and with the United Nations, and the targets we need to set for ourselves. The government already made an announcement recently, and we as a commission will look at that and see whether we agree with it, or we think it's too ambitious or too unambitious, or whatever else. We'll come to that.